After my wife's funeral, I inherited a rundown warehouse in the slums while my son received a massive fortune. When my son found out, he laughed and said, "You're a weak, mediocre man." Then kicked me out of the house within 48 hours. I decided to go to the warehouse on the most dangerous street in the city. But when I opened the door, I stood there in shock because of what I saw inside. I'm grateful you're here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if you've ever felt underestimated, like I was, type, "I understand." Note this story includes creative elements for reflection. Any similarities to real people are unintentional. What matters is the meaning it might hold for you. I stood outside Riverside Memorial Chapel. As the last mourners filed past me, their polite condolences still echoing like distant church bells. The October wind cut through my black suit, the same one I'd worn to our 30th anniversary dinner 2 years ago, back when Louise could still laugh without wincing from the pain. Nathaniel stood by the chapel entrance, shaking hands with business associates I barely recognized. At 35, my son had grown into a man I hardly knew, sharp-suited, clean-shaven, every gesture calculated. He worked the crowd like a seasoned politician, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Not once in the past 3 hours had he looked my way. Not during the service, not during the burial, not even now as the autumn sun dipped below the Detroit skyline. I wanted to walk over to put my hand on his shoulder to grieve together like fathers and sons should. But something in his posture, the way he angled his body away from where I stood, told me I wasn't welcome. 6 months earlier, Louise's hand had felt like paper in mine, her skin translucent against the white hospital sheets. The cancer had taken everything: her hair, her strength, the light in her green eyes. "Alan," she'd whispered, barely audible over the beeping monitors. "I'm sorry. For everything." I'd leaned closer, squeezing her hand gently. "Hey, now don't talk like that." But she'd shaken her head, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "You don't understand. There are things I should have—" Her voice had trailed off. I'd waited for hours for her to finish that sentence. She never did. The morning after the funeral, Marilyn Shepard's law office smelled like old books and lemon furniture polish. The lawyer sat behind an oak desk, adjusting her reading glasses. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to address Louise's will." Nathaniel sat beside me, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Marilyn opened the folder. The last will and testament of Louise Marie Freeman, executed 6 months prior to her passing. 6 months. Right when she'd apologized. "To my beloved son Nathaniel Freeman, I bequeath Freeman Manufacturing Company, currently valued at approximately $32 million. The words hit me hard, even though I'd expected them. The company I'd built from nothing. The factory floor I'd walked every morning for 40 years. The family residence located at 185 Lakeshore Road, Grosse Pointe Shores, Michigan, valued at $5.5 million. Our home. Where Louise had planted roses every spring. Where I'd built Nathaniel a treehouse that still stood in the backyard. The penthouse apartment at 750 Park Avenue, Manhattan, valued at $3.2 million. Louise had loved that place. Weekends in Central Park, Broadway shows, and finally, all bank accounts, stocks, and securities in Louise Freeman's name, totaling approximately $2.8 million. $43.7 million. Everything. She'd left him everything. Marilyn's eyes met mine briefly. "And to my husband, Alan Douglas Freeman, I leave the contents of storage facility 2847 Fort Street, Southwest Detroit, Michigan, Unit C7. Silence. Then Nathaniel laughed. It started as a quiet snort, but grew into full-throated laughter that filled the wood-paneled office. "Wait, wait!" he said, wiping his eyes. An old car in some warehouse in southwest Detroit. That's what Dad gets, an old car. Marilyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Freeman, please. But Nathaniel couldn't stop. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. He stood up, still chuckling. Well, Dad, enjoy your car. I've got a company to run. He was out the door before I could find my voice. Marilyn slid a manila envelope across the desk. The key and address are inside, Mr. Freeman. I'm truly sorry for your loss. That evening, the house felt wrong when I returned, not just empty, but foreign, like I was trespassing in someone else's home. Nathaniel's car sat in the driveway, but his bedroom light was already off. He'd come home and gone straight to his room without a word. I sank into my old recliner, the one Louise had always called an eyesore but never threw out. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. On the mantel above the fireplace, our wedding photo looked down at me. Louise in her simple white dress, me in my father's borrowed suit, both of us grinning like fools outside Detroit City Hall. We'd been 23 years old, broke as hell. So damn happy. What happened to us? When did Nathaniel become this cold stranger? I pulled the envelope from my jacket. Inside was a single silver key, attached to a paper tag, with an address in Louise's handwriting, 2847 Fort Street, Unit C7. A sound from upstairs made me look up. Through the window, I could see Nathaniel's bedroom light flicker on for just a moment, then go dark again. He was up there awake and he hadn't said a word to me, hadn't asked if I was okay, hadn't offered comfort. I was alone. More than alone, I was invisible, a ghost haunting rooms that no longer belonged to me. The key felt cold in my palm. What could possibly be in a storage unit in southwest Detroit that Louise thought was worth leaving me? Why would she go to the trouble of putting it in her will? Why Fort Street? Of all places, one of the roughest neighborhoods left in the city, and why in her final moments had she apologized for everything? A week had passed since I'd buried Louise when Nathaniel appeared in the living room doorway, holding a manila envelope. I was sitting in my recliner when his shadow fell across the hardwood floor. We need to talk, he said, his voice flat and businesslike. I looked up, hope flickering in my chest. Maybe the grief had finally softened him. Sure, son. Sit down. I'm not staying. He dropped the envelope on the coffee table. The house is mine now. You have 48 hours to vacate. The words didn't register at first. What? 48 hours, Dad. Legally, I could have you out today. He straightened his tie. I've already spoken with my attorney. I pulled out the papers with shaking hands. Legal jargon swam before my eyes, sole proprietor, immediate possession, vacate within 48 hours. Nathaniel, this is our home. Your mother just died. My home. He corrected his voice, sharp as broken glass. The will was clear. I stood up, legs unsteady. I raised you, 35 years. I changed your diapers, taught you to read, sat up with you when you had nightmares. I worked 60-hour weeks to give you everything. My voice cracked. Doesn't that count for something? For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by cold indifference. What did you do for this family, Dad? He turned toward the window. You worked in a factory. You came home tired every night. You were adequate. His eyes met mine. Mom was the one with ambition. You're just a weak man who settled for mediocrity. The words hit like physical blows. 48 hours, Nathaniel repeated. Then he was gone. His BMW roared down Lakeshore Road. The next morning, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. The room still smelled faintly of Louise's perfume. I pulled my old duffel bag from the closet and stared at it for a long moment. What does a man take when he loses everything? I packed slowly. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my work boots. The framed wedding photo from the dresser, Louise in her simple white dress, me in my father's borrowed suit, both of us grinning outside City Hall. And from my nightstand, the watch Louise had given me on my 20th birthday. The leather band was cracked with age, but the second hand still swept around the face with perfect precision. A memory hit me then. Nathaniel's 5th birthday. Palmer Park on a Sunday afternoon in May. He'd begged me to teach him to ride his bike without training wheels. Louise had protested, "He's too young, Alan," but I'd seen that stubborn determination in his eyes. We'd spent 2 hours on the park path, me running alongside him, one hand steadying the seat. "I got you, buddy. I won't let you fall." And then it happened. He found his balance, pedaled 5 feet, then 10, then 20. His laughter rang out across the park like church bells. He'd circled back to me, his face glowing. Did you see, Dad? Did you see me?" I'd scooped him up, held him close. "I saw you, buddy. I'm so proud I could burst." I wondered if he even remembered that day. I zipped the duffel bag and took one last look around. 30 years of marriage, 35 years of fatherhood, all of it packed into one small bag. The sun was low when I walked down the stairs for the last time. In the entryway, I paused at the growth chart Louise had penciled onto the doorframe, every inch of Nathaniel's childhood, marked in faded graphite. The mark stopped at 18 when he'd left for college and never really come back. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke. Down the street, Mrs. Henderson was raking leaves. She waved. I waved back, wondering if she knew I was leaving. I walked down the brick pathway Louise had edged with petunias every spring, past the rose bushes she'd pruned with such care, to the sidewalk where I'd taught my son to ride a bike 3 decades ago. I set the duffel bag down and looked back one final time. The house stood silent against the darkening sky, white columns, black shutters, perfect lawn. It looked like someone else's life, because that's what it was now. I picked up my bag and started walking toward the bus stop, 3 blocks away. From there, I'd catch the downtown line, then transfer southwest, toward the warehouse, toward whatever Louise had left me. 48 hours ago, I'd stood at my wife's funeral feeling lost. Now I was actually alone, carrying everything I owned in a single bag, heading into the roughest part of Detroit, with nothing but questions. But as I walked away from the only home I'd known for 30 years, something unexpected stirred in my chest. Not hope exactly. Not yet. Determination. Louise had left me something, hidden it away, made sure it was in her will. And in her final moments, she'd apologized for everything. Whatever waited for me in that warehouse, it mattered. She'd wanted me to find it. So that's exactly what I was going to do. The cab dropped me off at the corner of Fort Street and Livernois, just as the sun began its descent behind the skeletal remains of the old Packard plant. I stood there for a moment, duffel bag in hand, watching the taillights disappear back toward civilization. This wasn't the Detroit I knew. This was the Detroit people warned you about. Fort Street stretched before me like a wound that had never healed. Abandoned factories lined both sides, their broken windows staring out like empty eye sockets. Graffiti covered every surface. A shopping cart lay overturned in the middle of the street, one wheel still spinning in the October wind. The address Louise had written led me 4 blocks down, past a burned-out gas station and a church with plywood over its windows. And then I saw it, 2847 Fort Street. The warehouse rose up from the cracked pavement like a tombstone. Red brick 3 stories tall with a rusted metal door that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. Above the door, faded letters spelled out, Motor City Storage, ES 1952. Most of the windows on the upper floors were broken, pigeons nested in the rafters. This was what Louise had left me, this forgotten corner of a forgotten city. I was reaching for the key in my pocket when I heard a voice. "You must be Freeman." I turned to find an older black man emerging from a small security cabin tucked beside the building. He was maybe 54 with gray stubble on his jaw and kind eyes that had seen too much. He wore a thick canvas jacket and carried a flashlight in one weathered hand. "That's right," I said. "Alan Freeman." "Roy Bennett." He offered his hand, and I shook it. His grip was firm, calloused. "I'm the site manager here. Have been for 32 years. He looked me over. "Your wife was a good woman. I'm sorry for your loss." "You knew Louise?" "Not well. But she came by every year to pay the rental fee. Cash, always cash. 30 years she paid for this unit." So he gestured toward the door. "Never missed a payment. Never asked to go inside. Just paid and left." 30 years. Louise had been paying for this storage unit for 30 years. The weight of that settled over me. "Did she ever say what was inside?" Roy shook his head. "Only thing she ever told me was that it was important. That someday you'd come for it." He pulled a newer key from his pocket. "This opens the main door. The key you have opens the unit itself. But Mr. Freeman..." He paused. "She made me promise something. Made me write it down and sign it legal-like." "What's that?" "That only you could go inside. Nobody else. Not your son, not a lawyer, not the police. Just you." His eyes held mine. She was real clear about that. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. What had Louise hidden here that required that level of secrecy? Roy handed me the master key. "I'll be in my cabin if you need anything. Take your time." I watched him walk back to his cabin, Then I turned to face the metal door. The master key turned with a screech of protest. The door swung inward, revealing a concrete corridor that disappeared into blackness. The smell hit me immediately, dust, rust, and time itself. I pulled out my phone and turned on its flashlight. Unit C7 was at the end of the corridor, marked by peeling paint and another rusted metal door. This one was different, newer, with a heavy-duty padlock that looked like it could withstand anything. My hands shook as I pulled out Louise's key. It slid into the lock smoothly. One turn. A metallic click that echoed through the empty building. I pushed the door open. The space beyond was roughly 20 by 30 feet. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by my phone's light like stars in a private galaxy. And there, in the center of the concrete floor, was a shape covered by a heavy canvas tarp. A vehicle. That much was obvious from the contours. I stepped inside, and the door swung shut behind me with a boom that made my heart jump. For a moment I stood in near total darkness. The air felt different in here. Not just old, but charged somehow. Electric. Like the moment before a thunderstorm when you can feel the lightning building. I moved forward slowly, my footsteps stirring up 30 years of accumulated dust. The tarp loomed larger as I approached, taking shape in the dim light. I could make out the curve of fenders, the slope of a hood, the suggestion of chrome beneath the heavy fabric. My hand reached out. The canvas was rough under my fingers, thick and cold and covered in grime. I stood there with my palm pressed against it, feeling my pulse throb in my throat. I'm sorry for everything Louise had said. Her last words. This was her answer. Whatever lay beneath this covering was the truth she'd never been able to speak. Around me, the warehouse creaked and settled. Water dripped somewhere overhead. Pigeons cooed in the rafters above. But in this room, in this moment, There was only silence and dust and the weight of 3 decades. I thought about the past week, the funeral, Nathaniel's cold indifference, the will reading, being thrown out of my own home, the long bus ride through Detroit's broken streets to get here. Every step had led to this moment, to this tarp, to whatever Louise had hidden away for 30 years. She'd paid for this unit since before Nathaniel was born. She'd made Roy promise that only I could enter. She'd put it in her will, made sure I'd find it. And on her deathbed, she'd apologized for everything without explaining why. All the answers were here, under this canvas, waiting. My fingers gripped the edge of the tarp. The fabric was heavy resistant. I could feel the weight of decades pressing down on it. "Louise," I whispered into the darkness, half expecting her ghost to answer. "What did you hide here?" The warehouse offered no reply, just the drip of water, the rustle of pigeons, the whisper of my own breathing in the dark. I took a breath and held it. Then I pulled. The canvas came away in my hands like a curtain falling. Dust billowed into the air, catching in the beam of my phone's flashlight, and for a moment I couldn't see anything but swirling particles dancing in the light. Then the dust settled, and I stopped breathing. A 1954 Ford Thunderbird gleamed before me like a jewel waiting to be discovered. The body was painted a stunning turquoise blue, the kind of color that belonged to Miami beaches and summer skies, not to this forgotten warehouse in Detroit's ruins. Chrome accents caught the light and threw it back at me. The white wall tires looked pristine. The convertible top was perfectly intact. This wasn't the rusted-out Hulk I'd imagined. This wasn't some piece of junk Louise had gotten stuck with. This was a showpiece, a classic, a car that had been maintained, preserved, cherished for 3 decades. I walked around it slowly, my phone's light revealing more details. No rust, no dents or scratches. The bumpers shone like they'd been polished yesterday. Through the windows, I could see cream-colored leather seats that looked soft as butter. Louise had done this. For 30 years, she'd paid Roy to keep this warehouse. She'd maintained this car in perfect condition, hidden it away from everyone. Why my hand reached out and touched the driver's side door handle. The chrome was cold under my fingers. I pulled and the door opened with a smooth click that spoke of well-oiled hinges. The smell hit me immediately, rich leather, old wood, and something else. Her perfume. That same light floral scent that had clung to our bedroom. Louise had been here. I slid into the driver's seat, and it was like stepping back in time. The leather embraced me, still supple. The steering wheel was wrapped in wood and chrome. The dashboard featured elegant gauges with Art Deco styling, speedometer, fuel gauge temperature. Everything looked original, authentic, perfect. And there on top of the dashboard sat a small envelope. My name was written across the front in Louise's handwriting. Not just Alan, but Alan, my love, in that flowing script she'd used for grocery lists and birthday cards and love notes. My hands shook as I picked it up. I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of stationery inside. My dearest Alan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for the pain Nathaniel has caused you. I'm sorry for the secrets I kept. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth while I still had time. But this isn't the end, my love. This is your new beginning. Everything you need is here. Look beneath the driver's seat. The key to everything is there, the key to the truth, the key to your future. The key to understanding why I did what I did. I love you, Alan. I have always loved you. Even when I made mistakes. Even when I kept secrets. You were the best man I ever knew, and you deserved better than what I gave you. Forgive me if you can. but more importantly, live. Really live. The life I've given you here, it's yours now. Take it. Use it. Be free. Always and forever yours, Louise. I read it twice. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the letter. Look beneath the driver's seat. I set the letter on the passenger seat and leaned down, reaching under the driver's seat into the darkness below. My fingers found nothing at first, just empty space. Then toward the back, I felt something different. A small metal lever hidden from view, cool to the touch. I gripped it and pulled. A mechanical click echoed through the car. I felt something give way beneath my feet. A section of the floor behind the driver's seat had popped up slightly, revealing a seam I hadn't noticed before. The carpet was cut to disguise it perfectly. I got out and walked around to the passenger side. Then I knelt on the dusty concrete and pulled the floor panel up fully. It lifted away to reveal a compartment built into the car's frame. And inside that compartment was a small black safe about the size of a briefcase with an electronic keypad glowing faintly in the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever Louise had hidden, whatever secrets she'd kept for 30 years, they were in this safe. The keypad blinked at me, waiting. 6 digits. And then I remembered. Of course I remembered. It was the one date Louise had never forgotten, not in 40 years of marriage. The one day she'd always celebrated, even when money was tight, even when times were hard. July 15th, 1954. My birthday. I reached out my finger, hovering over the keypad. Around me, the warehouse was completely silent. Even the pigeons had stopped cooing. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. This was it. The moment everything changed. Once I opened this safe, there would be no going back. Whatever truth Louise had hidden away, I would know it all. My finger trembled as it descended toward the first number. 0, 7, 1, 5, 5, 4. The safe beeped once, twice. Then I heard the metallic thunk of locks disengaging. The door swung open slightly, revealing darkness within. I pulled it open fully and shined my phone's light inside. Light flooded the safe's interior, and what I saw made no sense at first. My brain couldn't process it. Couldn't reconcile what my eyes were telling me with everything I thought I knew about my life. Money. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills bound with paper bands and organized with Louise's characteristic precision. I reached in with trembling hands and pulled out one stack. Benjamin Franklin's face stared up at me, crisp and clean. I counted the bills mechanically. 100. $10,000 in my hand. I pulled out another stack and another. Laid them on the concrete floor beside me, kept pulling until the safe's first layer was empty and I was surrounded by neat piles of cash. $350,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. More money than I'd made in 5 years at the factory. Just sitting here in a safe in a car in an abandoned warehouse. But there was more. Beneath the cash, a manila folder lay flat against the safe's bottom. I pulled it out and opened it. The first document was a bank statement from Cayman Islands International Trust. The account holder's name jumped out at me, Alan Douglas Freeman. My hands shook as I read the balance, $4,500,000. $4.5 million in an offshore account, in my name. I flipped to the next page. A certificate of patent registration from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Some kind of manufacturing process technology. The patent holder, Alan Douglas Freeman. Estimated value, according to the attached appraisal, $2 million. The next document was a property deed. A cabin on Flathead Lake in Montana. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 15 acres of land. Deed holder Alan Douglas Freeman. Assessed value $1,200,000. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The numbers swam before my eyes. Louise had created an entire financial life for me. Hidden assets worth millions. All in my name. All waiting. But why my hands found another document in the folder? Thicker paper, official looking. I unfolded it carefully. Life insurance policy number LF-2024-089455. Issued by Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Insured Louise Marie Freeman. Beneficiary Alan Douglas Freeman. Death benefit $12 million. $12 million. I read it 3 times. The policy had been active for 30 years. Louise had been paying premiums for 3 decades. $12 million would be transferred to my account upon proof of death and submission of the proper paperwork. The total wealth Louise had left me wasn't $43 million like Nathaniel had received. It was more. $20 million, give or take. Hidden away. Protected. Waiting for me to find it. But still why I set the insurance policy aside and reached into the safe one last time. My fingers found a small wooden box pushed into the back corner. It was about the size of a cigar box, made of polished cherry wood, with a tiny brass lock. The key was taped to the lid. I peeled off the tape and unlocked the box. The hinges creaked as I lifted the lid. Inside, 3 items lay carefully arranged. I picked up the first one, a piece of paper yellowed with age, folded many times. I unfolded it gently, afraid it might tear. Laboratory letterhead, Detroit Medical Center. A date October 15, 1989, 35 years ago. DNA paternity test results. Alleged father Alan Douglas Freeman. Child Nathaniel James Freeman. Result excluded. Probability of paternity 0.00%, the words blurred. I blinked hard, forcing myself to focus. Read it again, and again. 0%. Nathaniel wasn't my son. Biologically, genetically, he had no connection to me whatsoever. The paper slipped from my fingers and drifted to the concrete floor. I reached into the box again, moving like a man in a dream. The second item was an envelope thick with pages. Louise's handwriting across the front, the truth about Nathaniel. I couldn't open it yet. Couldn't read it. Not yet. Instead, I picked up the third item. A photograph, small and faded. The colors had that washed-out quality of pictures from the 80s. In it, a young Louise, maybe 25, 26 years old, stood next to a man I'd never seen before. He was older, maybe 40, with sharp features and an expensive suit. His hand rested possessively on Louise's shoulder. She wasn't smiling. I turned the photo over. 3 words written in Louise's hand. Dominic Caldwell, 1989. The same year as the DNA test. The same year Nathaniel was born. The warehouse spun around me. I pressed my back against the Thunderbird's tire, trying to anchor myself to something solid. My mind raced, connecting dots I'd never seen before. Louise pregnant in 1989. Me so happy, so proud to be a father. Working double shifts to save money for the baby. Coming home exhausted to rub her swollen feet and talk to her belly. But the baby wasn't mine. Nathaniel wasn't mine. 35 years. I'd raised him, changed his diapers, walked the floor with him when he had colic, taught him to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man, worked myself to exhaustion to give him everything he needed, loved him with every fiber of my being, and he wasn't mine. Dominic Caldwell, the man in the photo, sharp suit, possessive hand. The kind of man who took what he wanted and didn't care who he hurt. Was he Nathaniel's real father? Is that why Louise had hidden this? Why she'd apologized in her final moments? I'm sorry for everything. Now those words made terrible, perfect sense. I picked up the DNA test results again, stared at that zero, that absolute undeniable zero. Then I looked at the envelope with Louise's letter. The truth about Nathaniel. My hands shook as I reached for it. This was it. The answer to every question. The explanation for 35 years of secrets. But I couldn't open it. Not here. Not now. Not sitting on a concrete floor in an abandoned warehouse with $20 million in cash and documents scattered around me like the wreckage of my entire life. I gathered everything carefully. The money, the bank statements, the insurance policy, the deed to the Montana cabin, the patent certificate, the wooden box with its photograph and DNA test and unopened letter. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky beneath me. Through the Thunderbird's windows, I could see the warehouse door still slightly ajar, showing a slice of darkness beyond. Nathaniel's voice echoed in my memory. "What did you do for this family, Dad? You're just a weak man who settled for mediocrity." I looked down at the DNA test in my hand, at that 0%. Now I knew why he'd said it, why he'd treated me with such contempt, why Louise had cried and apologized. Because for 35 years I'd raised another man's son, and nobody had told me the truth. I climbed back into the Thunderbird and closed the door, shutting out the warehouse's darkness. The interior light cast a soft glow over the cream leather seats. I sat there for a long moment, the envelope resting on the steering wheel, Louise's handwriting staring up at me. The truth about Nathaniel. My hands shook as I broke the seal and pulled out several pages of stationery. Louise's elegant cursive filled every line. I took a breath and began to read. "My dearest Alan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means I never found the courage to tell you face to face what I should have told you 35 years ago. I am a coward. But I am also a woman who loves you more than anything else in this world. What I'm about to tell you will break your heart, and I will carry that guilt with me to my grave. I'm so sorry, Alan." My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. It happened in 1989. You remember that year? You'd been laid off from the Palmer plant. We were drowning in debt. I was working as a paralegal at Morrison and Associates downtown, trying to keep us afloat. That's when I met Dominic Caldwell, the name from the photograph. My stomach twisted. He was a client, wealthy, powerful, charming in that dangerous way. He knew we were struggling. He offered to help. Lunches turned into dinners, drinks after work. He said he could get you a job, make our problems disappear. I was weak, Alan. So tired of being poor, of watching you come home defeated. He made me feel like I mattered. I told myself it was just friendship. But one night, after too much wine and too many promises, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I stopped reading, closed my eyes, tried to breathe through the pain. It happened once. Just once. Immediately, I knew what I'd done was unforgivable. I ended it. Told Dominic I loved you. He laughed, said I was a stupid girl playing in the big leagues. Then he walked away. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. The words swam on the page. I didn't know if the baby was yours or his. The timing was close enough that it could have been either of you. I went to Dominic, begged him to help me figure out what to do. He told me to get rid of it. Said if I didn't, he'd destroy both of us. He'd ruin you. Make sure you never worked in Detroit again. I was terrified, so I made a choice. I came home to you. When you saw the pregnancy test, saw how happy you were, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't destroy that joy. I chose you, Alan. I chose our family. I let you believe Nathaniel was your son because I couldn't bear to lose you. I did it because I loved you. and because I was scared. I set the letter down, hands shaking. The warehouse was silent except for my ragged breathing. She'd lied. For 35 years. Let me raise another man's child. But I kept reading. When Nathaniel was 10 years old, I couldn't stand not knowing anymore. I took samples, a hair from your brush, a hair from his pillow, and sent them to a private lab. The results came back 0% match. Nathaniel wasn't your biological son. He was Dominic's. I should have told you then. But you'd been his father for a decade. You loved him. He loved you. How could I destroy that? So I buried the test results. And I spent the next 25 years living with what I'd done. 25 years. She'd known for 25 years and never said a word. I watched Nathaniel grow up, Alan. And I watched him become more and more like Dominic. The coldness, the ambition, the cruelty. It's in his blood. I knew he would hurt you eventually. The way he looked at you sometimes like you were beneath him. That's when I started preparing this. The offshore account. The patent I registered in your name. The Montana cabin. The insurance policy. The Thunderbird. I spent 30 years building you a second life. A life you could escape to when Nathaniel finally showed his true colors. Just like I betrayed you. The letter ended there, but there was a postscript at the bottom. I don't expect you to forgive me, but please know that everything I did, every secret I kept, every lie I told I did, because I loved you. You were the best man I ever knew, Alan. You deserved better than what I gave you. But maybe now you can have the life you should have had all along. A life that's truly yours. I love you. Always and forever. Louise, I folded the letter carefully and set it on the dashboard. Then I sat in the silence of the Thunderbird, in the darkness of the warehouse, and let myself feel everything. Betrayal, anger, grief, loss, but also something unexpected, understanding. Louise had made terrible choices. She'd lied to me for 35 years. She'd let me raise another man's child. But she'd also loved me. In her broken, flawed way, she'd tried to protect me, tried to make things right. The $20 million wasn't just money. It was her apology. Her way of saying she knew what she'd cost me. I thought about Nathaniel, about the boy I'd loved with everything I had, about the man who'd thrown me out like garbage. He had Dominic's blood, Dominic's cruelty running through his veins. What did you do for this family, Dad? You're just a weak man who settled for mediocrity. Those words made sense now. Not because I was weak, but because Nathaniel had his father's coldness, his father's contempt for people he considered beneath him. I picked up the Montana cabin deed from the pile of documents. Flathead Lake, 15 acres, 2 bedrooms, a place where I could start over. I wiped my eyes and took a shaky breath. The tears came then hot and angry and sad all at once. I cried for the boy I'd raised, for the marriage I'd believed in, for the 35 years I'd spent living in a lie. But I also cried for Louise, for the burden she'd carried, for the guilt that had eaten at her for decades, for the desperate way she'd tried to make it right. When the tears finally stopped, I sat in the quiet darkness and made a decision. I would go to Montana. I would see what Louise had left me there. And I would figure out what to do with this new life she'd given me. The documents sat beside me, proof of $20 million. Proof of a second chance. I looked at the photograph of Dominic Caldwell again. Sharp suit, possessive hand on Louise's shoulder. The kind of man who took what he wanted and walked away. Did Nathaniel know? Did he know the truth about his own blood? Or had Louise kept that secret from everyone, even her son? I gathered the letter, the photograph, and the DNA test carefully. These would come with me. The rest, the cash, the bank statements, the insurance policy, I'd deal with tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed to understand what I'd lost and what I'd gained. I turned off the Thunderbird's interior light and sat in the darkness holding Louise's letter in both hands. She'd spent 30 years preparing for this moment, building me an escape route, giving me the tools to survive Nathaniel's betrayal. She'd known it was coming, and she'd tried to save me. Maybe that was love. Broken and flawed and built on lies, but love nonetheless. I folded the letter one more time and tucked it into my jacket pocket right next to my heart. Then I opened the car door and stepped back into the warehouse, ready to face whatever came next. 2 days later, I was behind the wheel of the Thunderbird heading west on Interstate 90 Detroit, shrinking in my rearview mirror. The drive took 30 hours through Wisconsin's dairy farms, South Dakota's plains, and Wyoming's mountain passes. The Thunderbird handled beautifully, eating up the miles like it had been waiting 30 years for this journey. I arrived at Flathead Lake just as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The GPS led me down a winding gravel road through dense pine forest. Then the trees opened up, and I caught my breath. The cabin sat on a small promontory overlooking the lake surrounded by towering pines. Built from weathered silver logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A covered porch faced the water. But it was the view that stopped me. Flathead Lake stretched out like glass reflecting orange and pink clouds. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks dusted with early snow. The water was so clear I could see rocks on the bottom. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. I parked beside the cabin and walked up the wooden steps. The key fit perfectly. The door swung open with a creak. Inside was simple but well-maintained. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms off a short hallway, furniture covered in white sheets. Everything smelled of cedar and pine. I walked through, slowly pulling sheets off furniture, opening windows to let in evening air. In the main room, a desk sat beneath a window overlooking the lake. And on that desk was a cardboard box. A label on top read in Louise's handwriting, "For Alan, evidence." My heart rate picked up. What more could there be? I opened the box carefully. Inside were file folders organized with Louise's meticulous care. I pulled out the first one, Dominic Caldwell. The name was printed across the top of every document. The first section contained financial records, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, corporate filings. Even I could see the pattern. Money moving from legitimate businesses into offshore accounts. Complex corporate structures designed to hide ownership. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Panama, Luxembourg. Louise had highlighted certain transactions in yellow. The next folder contained printed emails. I recognized the domain at caldwell-enterprises.com, Dominic's company. Then I found a thread that made my blood run cold. An email from 3 years ago, from Dominic Caldwell to Nathaniel Freeman at Freeman Manufacturing. Nathaniel, it's time we met face to face. There are things about your heritage you should know. Things your mother never had the courage to tell you. I can offer you opportunities beyond what that factory could ever provide. But first you need to prove you're worthy of the Caldwell name. Call me. I flipped to the next page. Nathaniel's response. Who are you? How do you know my mother? Dominic's reply was brief. I'm your father. The real one. Call me. I sat down hard in the desk chair, the folder trembling in my hands. 3 years ago. Dominic had contacted Nathaniel 3 years ago, told him the truth Louise had hidden for 35 years. The emails went back and forth over several weeks. Dominic telling Nathaniel about his true bloodline, about the Caldwell empire. about how Nathaniel was wasting his potential at that small-time factory. And slowly I watched Nathaniel fall under Dominic's spell. You're right. I've been playing in the minor leagues. It's time to claim what's mine. My father Alan, he's weak. Always has been. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending he matters. The words hit like physical blows. 3 years ago, while Louise was battling cancer, while I was at her bedside. Nathaniel had been plotting with Dominic. I set the emails aside and found another folder labeled Audio Handle with Care. Inside was a small digital recorder. I pressed play with shaking hands. Static. Then voices. Dominic's voice, older, rough, but confident and commanding. You're my blood, Nathaniel. My son. And it's time you started acting like it. Nathaniel's voice responded younger and eager. What do you want me to do? That man who raised you, Alan Freeman, he's nothing. A weak factory worker who got lucky marrying Louise. He doesn't deserve what he has. You do. How do I take it? All of it. The company, the house, everything. Your mother left him that ridiculous storage unit with the car. Let him have that. But everything that matters, that's yours. Prove to me you're a Caldwell. Prove you're not soft like him. Silence. Then Nathaniel's voice, quieter. He raised me. He was always good to me. He raised another man's son. That doesn't make him your father. I'm your father. Blood matters, Nathaniel. Blood is everything. What if he fights back? Dominic laughed a cold, harsh sound. He won't. Men like Alan Freeman don't fight back. They roll over and accept whatever life gives them. That's why they stay weak. I turned off the recorder and set it down. My hands were shaking. Not with sadness, with rage. Dominic had done this. He'd reached out to Nathaniel, poisoned him against me, turned my son. Not my son. I reminded myself into the cruel man who'd thrown me out, and Nathaniel had let him. I stood and walked to the window. The sun had set fully. Stars were beginning to appear over the mountains, more stars than I'd ever seen in Detroit, scattered across the sky like diamonds. Louise had known. That's why she'd collected all this evidence. She'd discovered Dominic's manipulation of Nathaniel and spent years gathering proof. Bank records showing Dominic's crimes, emails showing his influence, recordings proving his contempt. She'd been building a case, not just to explain what had happened, but to give me the tools to fight back. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Leonard Hayes, my college roommate. Now one of Detroit's top attorneys specializing in corporate litigation and white-collar crime. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. Not since Louise's diagnosis, when I'd pulled away from everyone. But if anyone could help me make sense of this evidence, if anyone could tell me whether I had a case not just against Nathaniel, but against Dominic Caldwell himself, it was Leonard. My finger hovered over his name. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines. The lake lapped gently against the shore. But I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't the weak man Dominic thought I was. The weak man Nathaniel had been taught to despise. Louise had given me $20 million. She'd given me evidence. She'd given me the truth. Now it was time to decide what to do with it. I pressed call. The phone rang once. Twice. Then Leonard's familiar voice, surprised and warm. Alan Freeman. Is that really you? Hey, Leonard. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need your help, and I need you to keep an open mind about what I'm about to tell you. Of course, what's going on? I looked out at the Montana darkness, at the stars reflected in the still water. Everything, I said. Everything's going on. 3 days after that phone call from Montana, I sat across from Leonard Hayes in a quiet corner booth at Astoria Cafe on Grand River Avenue. The place was half empty on a Tuesday morning, just a few students with laptops and an elderly couple sharing a Danish, neutral ground. Away from law offices and prying eyes, Leonard looked the same as I remembered, just grayer around the temples. 59 years old now, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage used to. But his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, and right now deeply concerned. "Start from the beginning," he said, pushing a cup of black coffee toward me. "Don't leave anything out." So I did. I told him everything. The funeral where Nathaniel had ignored me. The will reading where I'd inherited nothing but a storage unit while my son, not my son, had gotten $43 million. Being thrown out of my own home with 48 hours' notice. The warehouse on Fort Street, the Thunderbird, the safe with $20 million in assets. Louise's letter confessing her affair with Dominic Caldwell. The DNA test showing 0% match between me and Nathaniel. Leonard listened without interrupting, his coffee growing cold. His expression never changed, but I saw his jaw tighten when I mentioned Dominic's name. Then I told him about Montana, the cabin, the evidence Louise had collected, the emails between Dominic and Nathaniel from 3 years ago. The recording where Dominic had called me weak had told Nathaniel to take everything from me. When I finished, Leonard sat back and let out a long, slow breath. Jesus, Alan. I pulled out the folder I'd brought copies of everything. The DNA test, Louise's letter, the emails, a USB drive with the audio recording, bank statements showing the offshore accounts, the life insurance policy, the deed to the Montana cabin. Leonard opened the folder and started reading. He took his time, his lawyer's mind processing every detail. I watched his expression shift from concern to anger to determination. Finally, he closed the folder and looked up at me. "Alan, this is big, really big. We're not just talking about a family dispute. We're talking about fraud, manipulation, possibly money laundering on Dominic's part." He paused. "And this is dangerous. Dominic Caldwell isn't just some businessman. He's connected, powerful. Once we start this, there's no going back." "I know." "Do you?" Leonard leaned forward. "Because Dominic will come after you with everything he's got. He'll try to discredit you, bury you in legal fees, maybe worse. And Nathaniel, even if he's been manipulated, he's chosen his path. Taking him on means destroying whatever relationship might be left." I thought about the recording, about Nathaniel's voice saying, "Maybe it's time I stopped pretending he matters," about standing on the sidewalk with everything I owned in a duffel bag. "There's nothing left to destroy," I said quietly. Leonard studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, then here's what we're looking at." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "Step 1, we verify that DNA test. It's 35 years old. Any lawyer will argue it's invalid. We need a new test properly documented with witnesses. If we file a paternity challenge as part of contesting the will, the court can order testing." He made a note. "Step 2, we investigate the will itself. Louise's letter suggests she never signed anything, leaving everything to Nathaniel. She'd spent 30 years building assets for you. We'll need a forensic document examiner. If that signature's forged, the whole thing falls apart. What about the notary Marilyn Shepard? We'll depose her. Find out who was actually present when that will was supposedly signed." Another note. "Step 3. We file a civil suit challenging the will and the distribution of assets. Contested estate, potential fraud, undue influence." He paused, tapping his pen. "Step 4 gets complicated. The evidence on Dominic, the financial records, the emails, the recording that's potential criminal activity. Wire fraud, money laundering, maybe racketeering, that's FBI territory. You think they'd be interested in taking down Dominic Caldwell? Hell yes. The Bureau's been trying to build a case against him for years. But if we hand them evidence of him actively manipulating someone to commit fraud... Leonard's eyes gleamed. That gets prosecutors very excited. And step 5. Leonard's expression darkened. Step 5 is preparing for Dominic to hit back. Because he will. He'll dig into your past looking for anything to discredit you. Countersuits. He might try to freeze the assets Louise left you. He'll use his connections to pressure me to drop the case. He met my eyes. This is going to get ugly, Alan. Really ugly. I thought about Louise. About 30 years she'd spent preparing for this moment. Building evidence. Creating a safety net. Making sure I'd have the resources to fight back. I'm prepared, I said. What do we need to do first? Leonard smiled, the first real smile since I'd started talking. First, you sign a retainer agreement. Then we document everything. Every conversation, every document, every piece of evidence. We build an airtight case before we make a single move. He pulled out his phone. I'm bringing in a forensic accountant I trust. If there's dirty money in Dominic's empire, we'll find it. And I know a former FBI agent who consults on white-collar cases. He can tell us if what we have is enough. How long will this take? Months, maybe longer. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Leonard looked at me seriously. Alan, I need to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely sure? Because once we file, your life becomes very complicated. I thought about Nathaniel's face when he'd laughed at my inheritance. About Dominic's voice on that recording dripping with contempt. About Louise's letter, her desperate apology for 35 years of secrets. I've spent my whole life being the guy who didn't make waves, I said. The guy who worked hard, kept his head down, and accepted what life gave him. That's what Dominic called weak. That's what Nathaniel learned to despise. I met Leonard's eyes. But I'm not that guy anymore. I don't have a home to lose. I don't have a son to disappoint. I don't have anything left except the truth and $20 million Louise left me to fight with. I leaned forward. So yeah, Leonard. I'm sure. Let's do this. Leonard reached across the table and shook my hand. His grip was firm, confident. Then let's take these bastards down. For the first time since Louise died, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. 2 months after that meeting at Astoria Cafe, the pieces started falling into place. Leonard worked like a machine, methodical and relentless, and I learned what it meant to have a real lawyer on your side. The first breakthrough came from a document examiner in Ann Arbor, a woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who'd testified in hundreds of fraud cases. Leonard had sent her the original will, along with samples of Louise's genuine signature from old tax returns, birthday cards, and letters I'd kept over the years. Her report came back on a Tuesday morning. Leonard called me at the Montana cabin where I'd been staying to avoid running into Nathaniel or anyone connected to him in Detroit. Alan, we've got it, Leonard said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. Mitchell's report is definitive. The signature on the will is a forgery. Not even a good one, apparently. Louise's authentic signature has a distinctive downward slant on the L and a loop on the final E that the forgery completely misses. Mitchell's willing to testify that there's no way Louise signed that document. I sat down heavily on the cabin's porch, looking out at Flathead Lake. So Nathaniel forged his own mother's signature. That's what it looks like, which brings us to step 2. Step 2 was Marilyn Shepard, the notary who'd witnessed the will. Leonard had scheduled a deposition at his office, and he wanted me there to hear it firsthand. I drove the Thunderbird back to Detroit 3 days later. The deposition took place in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Detroit River. Marilyn sat across from Leonard, a court reporter beside her, her hands folded on the table. She looked older than I remembered from the funeral, 57, maybe 58, with steel-gray hair and worried eyes. Leonard started gently establishing her credentials, her years of experience as a notary. Then he moved in. Ms. Shepard, can you describe the circumstances under which you notarized Louise Freeman's will? Marilyn shifted in her seat. Nathaniel Freeman contacted me, said his mother wanted to update her will but was too ill to come to my office. He asked if I could come to the house. And did you? Yes. I went to the Grosse Pointe residence on, she checked her notes, March 15th of this year. 6 months before Louise died. 3 months before she'd given me the key to the warehouse. Who was present when you arrived? Just Nathaniel. He said his mother was resting upstairs, didn't want to be disturbed. He had the will already prepared, already signed. He just needed me to witness and notarize it. Leonard leaned forward. Miss Shepard, did you actually see Louise Freeman sign that document? Marilyn's face crumpled. No, I didn't. And I should have insisted. That's proper procedure. The signer is supposed to sign in front of the notary, or at least acknowledge their signature. But Nathaniel was so convincing. He said his mother was very weak, barely conscious, that she'd signed it earlier in the day when she had a moment of clarity. He seemed genuinely concerned for her. So you notarized a document without verifying the signature? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been a notary for 23 years. I've never done anything like that before. But he was her son. I trusted him. She looked up, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mr. Freeman. If I'd known he was lying, if I'd insisted on seeing Louise myself. It's not your fault, I said quietly. Leonard shot me a look. I wasn't supposed to speak during the deposition, but I didn't care. He lied to you, just like he lied to everyone. After the deposition, Leonard had one more card to play. We needed current DNA evidence, something that couldn't be dismissed as old or contaminated. But we couldn't exactly ask Nathaniel to spit in a tube. That's where Patricia Warner came in. Patricia had worked at Freeman Manufacturing for 18 years. She'd been my assistant manager before I'd been forced out, and she'd stayed on when Nathaniel took over, partly because she needed the job, but mostly because she wanted to keep an eye on what he was doing to the company I'd built. Leonard met with her at a diner in Dearborn away from the factory. I waited in the Thunderbird outside, watching through the window as they talked. 20 minutes later, Leonard came out holding a small plastic bag. Patricia saved a coffee cup from Nathaniel's office, he said, sliding into the passenger seat. Says he drinks espresso every morning at exactly 8 a.m., leaves the cup on his desk. She grabbed it yesterday, sealed it in a bag. Perfect DNA sample. We sent it to the same private lab in Ann Arbor that had done Louise's test 35 years ago. They still had the original samples on file, mine and Nathaniel's from back then. The new test would either confirm or disprove what Louise had discovered. It took 5 days. 5 days of me pacing the cabin in Montana, staring at my phone, waiting. The results came via encrypted email. Leonard called immediately. 0% match, he said. Not even a distant relation. The lab's exact words were, probability of paternity 0.00%. These individuals do not share a biological father-son relationship. We've got scientific proof, Alan. Nathaniel isn't your son. I already knew it. Had known it since I'd read Louise's letter. But hearing it confirmed by an independent lab with current DNA evidence, it hit me all over again. 35 years of fatherhood erased by a number. But I didn't have time to grieve. Because Patricia had more to share. She came to Montana herself, taking a few days off work. We sat on the cabin's porch, and she told me everything she'd witnessed over the past 6 months. He fired 40% of the workforce. She said, her voice shaking with anger. People who'd been there 20-25 years. Your people, Alan. He didn't even give them severance packages, just pink slips and security escorts out the door. On what grounds? Restructuring. But that's not what he's doing. He's gutting the company, selling off equipment, liquidating inventory at pennies on the dollar. And the money's not going back into the business. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos she'd taken of financial documents. He's transferring funds to offshore accounts. Millions of dollars, Alan. He's stripping Freeman Manufacturing down to nothing. I looked at the numbers, at the wire transfers, at the account numbers that matched some of the shell companies in the evidence Louise had collected about Dominic. He's funneling money to his father, I said. That's what I think. And there's more. Patricia swiped to another photo. Phone records. I pulled them from the company account Nathaniel's been sloppy about security. Look at the number he calls most frequently. I recognized it. The same number that appeared in the emails Louise had found. Dominic Caldwell's private line. They talk 3-4 times a day, Patricia said. Sometimes for an hour or more. He's not running Freeman Manufacturing, Alan. He's destroying it on Dominic's orders. By the end of October, Leonard had assembled a case file that was 3 inches thick. DNA evidence proving Nathaniel wasn't my biological son. Expert testimony that Louise's signature was forged. Marilyn Shepard's admission that she'd never actually witnessed Louise sign the will. The life insurance policy naming me as the $12 million beneficiary. Financial records showing Nathaniel's systematic theft from the company. Phone logs and emails connecting him to Dominic Caldwell. We met at Leonard's office on a gray Tuesday afternoon. He spread the documents across his conference table like a general planning a battle. We have enough, he said. More than enough. I'm filing 3 separate actions. First, a civil suit to contest the will and challenge the distribution of assets that's the straightforward inheritance fight. Second, a fraud complaint based on the forged signature and false notarization. Third, a criminal referral to the FBI regarding the financial irregularities and Dominic's involvement. What are the charges? For Nathaniel, forgery, fraud, embezzlement, potentially identity theft, if we can prove he impersonated Louise to the notary. For Dominic, conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, possibly money laundering, depending on what the feds find when they dig into his accounts. Leonard looked up. This is going to blow up, Alan. Once we file it becomes public record. The media will be all over it. Your life, Louise's affair, Nathaniel's parentage, all of it will come out. I know. And you're okay with that. I thought about Louise, about the 30 years she'd spent in shame hiding the truth, about how that shame had poisoned everything. No more secrets, I said. Let it all come out. The truth is the only thing that matters now. Leonard nodded and picked up his phone. Then I'm filing tomorrow morning. I drove back to the Montana cabin that night, exhausted but unable to sleep. I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, watching the stars reflect on the lake, thinking about what came next. The phone rang at midnight. I didn't recognize the number, almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello. Silence on the other end, then breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing like someone who'd been crying. Bah! The voice was barely a whisper. It's me. It's Nathaniel. My hand tightened on the phone. I didn't say anything. Couldn't say anything. His voice cracked. I need to talk to you. Please, can we meet? I didn't answer his question on the phone. Didn't agree to meet. I just hung up and sat there in the darkness. But 24 hours later, there he was. I'd driven back to Detroit that morning. Leonard had paperwork for me to sign before the filings went through. I stopped by the Fort Street warehouse to check on it. Roy had been keeping an eye on the place, but I wanted to see it myself. It was raining. One of those cold October rains that feels like winter coming early. I was closing up the warehouse door when I heard footsteps behind me on the wet pavement. I turned around. Nathaniel stood there maybe 20 feet away. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was rumpled and stained. His hair hung limp and wet across his forehead. His face was pale, drawn with dark circles under his eyes. Rain ran down his cheeks, or maybe it was tears. "Bah!" he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, don't walk away." I should have gotten in the Thunderbird and driven off, should have called Leonard. But something in his voice, something broken and desperate, made me stay. "What do you want?" Nathaniel took a step closer. His hands were shaking. "I'm sorry. God bay, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve to be here. But I had to see you. I had to tell you I was wrong, about everything. You threw me out of my own home. I know. You called me weak, said I was nothing. I know," his voice broke. "And I hate myself for it, every single day." I crossed my arms, rain soaking through my jacket. "Then why'd you do it?" He wiped his face. "Because someone told me to. Someone convinced me that's what I was supposed to do." Dominic Caldwell. Nathaniel's eyes widened. "How do you—" He stopped. "You know about him?" "I know everything. Your mother left me a lot more than you thought." Nathaniel nodded slowly. He looked like he might collapse. "Then you know about him being my biological father." "I know." "Did you always know?" "No," I said. "I found out after your mother died. She left me a letter. DNA test results. Everything." Relief crossed Nathaniel's face. Or shame. "He contacted me 3 years ago, out of nowhere. Said he had information about my real heritage." Nathaniel laughed bitterly. "At first I didn't believe him, but then he showed me proof. Photos of him and Mom. He offered to pay for a DNA test. And you took it." "Yeah, the results came back. 0% match with you, but 99.9% match with him." Nathaniel's shoulders slumped. "Dominic Caldwell was my biological father, and you weren't. So you decided I didn't matter anymore." "That's not how it started. At first I just wanted to know about him. Dominic was impressive, Ba. Rich, powerful, everything I thought I wanted to be." Nathaniel's voice turned bitter. "And then he started talking about you. About how you were holding me back. How you were weak, settled for mediocrity. How if I really wanted to be a Caldwell, I needed to prove it. By taking everything from me." "Yes." Barely a whisper. "He said blood was everything, that you weren't really my father, that I didn't owe you anything, and I believed him. I forged Mom's signature on that will. I threw you out. I took everything. The whole time I told myself I was just claiming what was mine." The rain came down harder. Thunder rumbled. Neither of us moved. "And then what happened?" Nathaniel laughed a broken, hollow sound. "Then I called Dominic to tell him I'd done it, that I'd proven I was a real Caldwell. You know what he said?" He looked up at me. He said, "You betrayed the man who raised you for 35 years. What makes you think you wouldn't betray me?" Then he hung up. Blocked my number. Had his lawyers send a cease and desist, telling me never to contact him again. He used you. He used me. Got exactly what he wanted me, destroying you, then threw me away like trash. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around himself. And now everything's falling apart. The company's hemorrhaging money. I've got creditors coming after me. Legal bills piling up. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. I'm drowning, Ba. And I've got nobody. He took another step closer. I know I don't deserve your help, but you're the only person I have left. The only person who ever actually gave a damn about me. His voice dropped to a whisper. Please, Ba. I'm begging you. I don't know where else to go. I stood there in the rain, looking at this man who'd been my son for 35 years. I thought about the 5-year-old boy I'd taught to ride a bike in Palmer Park. The teenager who'd come to me with his first heartbreak. The young man I'd been so proud of at graduation. That boy was still in there somewhere, underneath all the damage Dominic had done. Maybe he could be saved. Or maybe I was being a fool. Maybe this was just another manipulation. But looking at him standing there in the rain, shaking and broken, I couldn't just turn away. Come on, I said finally. Get out of the rain. I opened the warehouse door. Nathaniel followed me inside, water dripping onto the concrete floor. I turned on the lights. The Thunderbird sat in the middle of the space, gleaming. Nathaniel stared at it. That's what Mom left you, a car. Among other things. He didn't ask what other things. Just stood there dripping and miserable. There's a heater in Roy's cabin, I said. You can stay there tonight, dry off, get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. Nathaniel looked at me with something that might have been hope. You mean it? You'll help me? I didn't say that. I said you can stay tonight. After that, I shook my head. I don't know, Nathaniel. You've got a lot to answer for. What situation? I almost told him. Almost said that tomorrow morning Leonard was filing lawsuits that would destroy everything, that we had DNA evidence and proof of forgery. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of that 5-year-old boy. Maybe it was Louise's voice still apologizing. Or maybe I just wanted to see what Nathaniel would do. Whether he'd come clean on his own, or whether this was just another scheme. We'll talk tomorrow, I said. Tonight, just get dry and rest. Nathaniel nodded. Thank you, Ba. I swear I'm going to make this right. I'm going to fix everything. I promise. He walked to the door, then turned back. The man in the photo, the one with Mom, that was Dominic, wasn't it? I pulled out my phone, found the photograph Louise had left. Young Louise standing next to the man in the expensive suit. I showed it to Nathaniel. Yeah, he said quietly. That's him. That's Dominic Caldwell. He left, heading to Roy's cabin. I watched through the warehouse window as he crossed the lot, his figure getting smaller in the rain and darkness. And I stood there in the silence, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. Alan let Nathaniel stay. Big mistake or leap of faith? Comment 1 if you're still with me. Fair warning, what follows is dramatized for impact. If that's not your thing, feel free to leave now. Otherwise, buckle up. The truth is about to explode. I couldn't sleep. I'd gone back to my motel room around midnight, leaving Nathaniel in Roy's cabin. But something gnawed at me. The way he'd looked at the Thunderbird. The way his eyes had lingered on the warehouse, calculating. At 2 a.m., I gave up. I got dressed, climbed into the Thunderbird, and drove back to Fort Street. The warehouse district was dead at that hour. I parked a block away and walked quietly, my breath fogging in the cold October air. That's when I saw it. A thin line of light under the warehouse door. Someone was inside. I eased the door open just enough to slip through. The lights were on, and there beside the Thunderbird was Nathaniel. He had my briefcase open, the one I'd left in the car's trunk. Documents were spread across the hood. The insurance policy, the offshore bank statements, the Montana cabin deed, everything Louise had left me. And Nathaniel was photographing them, one by one, his phone clicking softly. I stayed in the shadows near the door watching. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay quiet. Nathaniel finished photographing a bank statement showing the $4.5 million Cayman account. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, I'm in," he said quietly. "You were right. The old man's got everything here. Insurance policy for $12 million, offshore accounts $4.5 million, the cabin in Montana, a patent worth $2 million. It's all just sitting here." Silence as he listened. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. The crying in the rain act worked perfectly. He actually felt sorry for me." Nathaniel laughed, not the broken laugh from earlier. This one was cold. "I told you he's weak. He raised me for 35 years. He's not going to stop now." My hands clenched into fists. "So what's the play?" Nathaniel asked. He listened, nodding. "Right, I stay close. Pretend I'm grateful. Get him to give me access to the accounts." He paused. "Then what about the lawsuits? How much does he know?" He listened. Shit. Okay. If he's planning to file fraud charges, I need to move faster. Maybe get him to sign power of attorney. Health scare, something like that. Once I have control, I transfer everything out before his lawyers can freeze it. Then I disappear. The voice on the other end said something. Nathaniel laughed. "Yeah, let him keep his stupid car. By the time he figures it out, I'll be in the Caymans with $20 million. I'd heard enough. I stepped out of the shadows and hit the light switch. The overhead fluorescence blazed to full brightness. Nathaniel spun around, eyes wide. "But I thought you were at the motel," I finished. "Yeah, that's what you were counting on." His face went through several expressions, surprise, fear, then settling on something cold and hard. The mask was off. What stood before me now was the real Nathaniel. "How long were you listening?" "Long enough." Nathaniel looked at the documents, at his phone, at me. Then he laughed. "Well, I guess the jig's up. You were never sorry. The rain, the crying, the story about Dominic abandoning you, it was all an act. Of course it was an act." Nathaniel's voice dripped with contempt. "You think I actually feel bad? You think I regret anything? I raised you for 35 years. You raised another man's son," Nathaniel shouted. "You were too stupid to even know you'd been cuckolded. Too weak to see Mom was lying to you the whole time. Too pathetic to do anything about it." He stepped toward me. "Dominic was right about you. You're not a man. You're a doormat. And I'm done pretending to respect you." I pulled out my phone. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing? Calling my lawyer and the police. For what? I didn't steal anything. I recorded your entire phone conversation." I held up my phone. The voice recorder app was running red timer counting. "Everything you just said, everything you planned, it's all on tape." Nathaniel's face went white, then red. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pressed stop, then play. Nathaniel's voice came through the speaker. The crying in the rain act worked perfectly. I stopped it. "I've got 15 minutes of you planning to defraud me out of $20 million. You're done, Nathaniel." For a moment I thought he might lunge at me. His hands balled into fists, his face twisted with rage. "You can't do this. I'm your son." "No," I said quietly. You're not. The DNA test proved that. And even if you were, you stopped being my son the day you forged your mother's signature and threw me out. I dialed Leonard's number. It rang twice before he picked up groggy. Alan, it's 2 in the morning. Leonard, I need you to call the police. Nathaniel's at the Fort Street warehouse. He just attempted fraud. I have a recording. Nathaniel turned and ran for the door, but Roy Bennett was already there, blocking the exit. The old security guard must have heard the commotion. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, flashlight in hand. Going somewhere, Mr. Freeman? Roy asked calmly. Nathaniel looked from Roy to me, trapped. The cold mask cracked. What was underneath was just fear. Pure, desperate fear. "Pa, please!" He tried one more time. "We can work this out." "No," I said. "We can't." Leonard's voice came through the phone. "Alan, talk to me. What's happening?" I looked at Nathaniel, this man I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. This man who'd betrayed me twice, who'd tried to destroy me, who felt nothing but contempt for everything I'd given him. And I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No lingering hope that he might change. Just emptiness where love used to be. "I caught him red-handed," I said into the phone. "He was photographing all my financial documents, planning to defraud me. I recorded his phone conversation admitting everything. Call the police. I'll wait here until they arrive." "I'm on it. Don't let him leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up. Nathaniel stood in the middle of the warehouse, Roy blocking the only exit, nowhere to run. "You're really going to do this?" Nathaniel said. Not a question. A statement. "Yes. After everything. After I called you Ba. After all those years." "After all those years," I echoed. "You threw me away like garbage. You forged your mother's will. You tried to steal everything she left me. And tonight you proved you'd do it again." I met his eyes. So yes, I'm really going to do this. In the distance, I heard sirens. Nathaniel heard them too. His shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. "I never loved you," he said quietly. "Not really. I don't think I ever did." "I know," I said. "I think I've always known." The sirens got louder. The sirens stopped outside the warehouse at 4 a.m. Red and blue lights swept through the broken windows, painting the walls in flashing colors. 2 Detroit PD patrol cars pulled up, followed 30 seconds later by Leonard's black Mercedes. Leonard came through the door first, wearing sweatpants and a University of Michigan hoodie, the first time I'd ever seen him in anything but a suit. 2 uniformed officers followed him in hands resting on their belts. "Alan," Leonard said, crossing to me. "You okay?" "I'm fine." I held out Nathaniel's phone. I'd taken it from him, while Roy kept him cornered. "Everything's on here. The photos he took of my documents, the call he made, text messages planning the whole thing." Leonard took the phone, carefully holding it by the edges. He pulled out a plastic evidence bag from his pocket and sealed it inside. Then he started scrolling through the screen, his lawyer's mind processing everything. "Jesus," he muttered. He photographed everything, the insurance policy, the bank statements, even took pictures of the Thunderbird's VIN number. He kept scrolling. "And these text messages." He looked up at me. "Alan, this is a gold mine. Look at this." He turned the phone so I could see. A text thread between Nathaniel and an unknown number from earlier that evening. "Got the old man to let me stay. Told you the sob story would work. Good. Get photos of everything. We need account numbers. What about the lawsuits he's filing? I have a lawyer who can tie those up for years. And I know a judge in Wayne County who owes me a favor. Your father's little case will die in pretrial motions. He's not my father." "Exactly." Now get me those account numbers. Leonard's jaw tightened. That's Dominic Caldwell. Has to be. I know a judge who owes me a favor. That's conspiracy to obstruct justice. Bribery. The FBI is going to have a field day with this. He turned to the two officers who'd been standing by, watching Nathaniel. Officers, this is Nathaniel Freeman. I'm filing charges on behalf of my client, Alan Freeman. The charges are as follows: forgery of a legal document, specifically a last will and testament. Fraud. Attempted theft. Conspiracy to commit fraud. And criminal trespass. The younger officer pulled out his notepad. That's a lot of charges, counselor. And we have evidence for all of them. DNA tests proving he forged his mother's signature on a will to steal an inheritance. Recorded phone conversations of him planning to defraud my client out of $20 million. And photographic evidence on that phone showing he broke into this warehouse tonight with intent to steal financial documents. The older officer looked at Nathaniel, who was still standing in the middle of the warehouse, Roy Bennett behind him. Mr. Freeman, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Nathaniel didn't move. He was looking at me. Bah, please, don't do this. I'm your son. Think about everything we've been through. All those years. Palmer Park. My graduation. Remember when I was 5 and you taught me to ride a bike? Remember how proud you were. His voice cracked. If I hadn't heard him on the phone an hour ago calling me weak and pathetic, I might have believed the emotion was real. I remember all of it, I said quietly. I remember every moment I spent raising you, every sacrifice I made, every time I told you I loved you. I took a step closer. But that boy I raised, the one I loved, he's not standing in front of me right now. Maybe he never existed. Maybe he was just a role you played because it was convenient. That's not true. An hour ago, you called me a doormat. You said I was too stupid to know your mother was lying. You said you were done pretending to respect me. I met his eyes. So no, I'm not going to think about Palmer Park or your graduation. I'm going to think about you standing in this warehouse photographing my financial documents so you could steal everything your mother left me to protect myself from you. Nathaniel's expression shifted. The pleading mask dropped away. What was left was cold. Hard. You're really going to do this? You're going to send me to prison? No, I said. You're going to send yourself to prison. I'm just going to make sure you get there. The older officer moved forward. Sir, I need you to turn around now. This time, Nathaniel complied. He turned, and the officer pulled his hands behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the warehouse. Nathaniel Freeman, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The Miranda rights continued, but I stopped listening. I just watched as they led Nathaniel toward the door. He looked back at me once, his face twisted with something that might have been hatred or might have been regret. I couldn't tell. Didn't care. Roy stepped aside to let them pass. The officers guided Nathaniel out into the cold October morning toward the waiting patrol car. Leonard stayed behind with me. This is just the beginning, you know. We still have to prosecute the will forgery. That's a separate case. And then there's Dominic. What about Dominic? Leonard held up the phone. These text messages are evidence of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. Dominic Caldwell trying to bribe a judge, obstruct justice. The FBI has been after him for years, but he's always been too careful, too insulated. But this, he smiled grimly. This is direct evidence. With Nathaniel in custody, they can offer him a deal, testify against Dominic in exchange for a reduced sentence. You think Nathaniel will take it? Depends on how scared he is. and how much he really knows about Dominic's operation. Leonard pocketed the evidence bag. But even if he doesn't, we have enough here to trigger a federal investigation. Wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering if they dig into those offshore accounts you found evidence of in Montana. Through the warehouse door, I watched the patrol car pull away Nathaniel, visible in the back seat behind the metal grate. The red and blue lights faded into the distance, leaving only the gray, pre-dawn darkness. "How do you feel?" Leonard asked. I thought about it, tried to identify what I was feeling. Not satisfaction exactly, not vindication, not even relief, just lightness. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for 3 months, maybe for 35 years, and I'd finally set it down. "Empty," I said. In a good way. Leonard put his hand on my shoulder. "Come on, let's get out of here. I need to start filing paperwork, and you need to get some real sleep. It's going to be a long few months." We walked toward the door together. Roy had already locked up and headed back to his cabin. The Thunderbird sat in the middle of the warehouse floor, still gleaming under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by the scattered documents Nathaniel had been photographing. Tomorrow I'd put everything away, secure it, start the next phase of whatever came after this. But tonight, this morning, I just wanted to drive. Find some all-night diner, get coffee and eggs, watch the sun come up over Detroit from a booth by the window. "You did the right thing," Leonard said as we reached his car. "I know. Nathaniel made his choices. You're not responsible for them." "I know that too." Leonard studied me in the dim light. "You're really okay, aren't you?" I thought about Louise, about her 30 years of guilt and secrets, about how that guilt had poisoned everything: her marriage, her relationship with Nathaniel, her own peace of mind. I wasn't going to carry that. Wasn't going to spend the next 30 years wondering if I'd done the right thing, if I should have given Nathaniel another chance, if blood really was thicker than betrayal. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." For the first time in 3 months, that was true. 6 months later, I sat in Wayne County Circuit Court, watching my son. Not my son stand trial for destroying me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood-paneled walls, rows of benches like church pews, windows looking out onto downtown Detroit's gray February skyline. Nathaniel sat at the defendant's table in a cheap suit. Prison had changed him. He'd lost weight. His hair was shorter, institutional. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollowed out. His lawyer was a young public defender named Marcus Webb. Nathaniel had burned through his money so fast he couldn't afford a private attorney. The company was bankrupt, the house foreclosed. Everything he'd stolen was gone. Leonard sat at the prosecutor's table. He'd been appointed special prosecutor. The district attorney wanted this handled right. The gallery was half full. A few reporters, Patricia Warner, Roy Bennett, Marilyn Shepard, looking uncomfortable. No one sat on Nathaniel's side. Judge Margaret Holloway entered, mid-60s, steel-gray hair, the kind of face that suggested she'd seen every lie humanity had to offer. "We're here for the people of Michigan versus Nathaniel James Freeman," she said. "Counselors, are you ready?" "Ready, Your Honor," Leonard said. "Ready, Your Honor," Webb echoed. Leonard's opening was direct. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about betrayal, about a man who forged his dying mother's signature to steal $43.5 million from the father who raised him for 35 years. And when that wasn't enough, he attempted to steal $20 million more. He walked along the jury box, making eye contact. The evidence will show that Nathaniel Freeman systematically destroyed Alan Freeman's life. He forged Louise Freeman's signature. He threw his father out with 48 hours' notice. He bankrupted the family business, and when Alan discovered the truth, Nathaniel pretended to be remorseful, while planning to steal every penny Alan had left. Marcus Webb countered, "My client doesn't deny mistakes were made, but Nathaniel Freeman is as much a victim as anyone here. He was manipulated by Dominic Caldwell, a powerful man who told Nathaniel that Alan wasn't his real father. Nathaniel was confused, angry. He'd just lost his mother and learned his father wasn't his biological parent. Yes, Nathaniel made terrible choices, but they were made under extreme emotional duress. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Dr. Sarah Mitchell testified that Louise's signature on the will was definitively forged, with zero probability of authenticity. Marilyn Shepard admitted she'd never seen Louise sign the will. Nathaniel told me his mother was too sick. I trusted him. I shouldn't have. The DNA technician explained, there is 0% probability that Alan Freeman is Nathaniel Freeman's biological father. Patricia Warner testified about Nathaniel's systematic looting. He fired 40% of the workforce, liquidated inventory at pennies on the dollar, transferred millions offshore. Within 6 months, a profitable company was bankrupt. Then came the recordings. Nathaniel's voice played through courtroom speakers. The crying in the rain act worked perfectly. He's weak. He's not going to stop me. I watched the jury's faces. Disgust replaced sympathy. On the 8th day, Nathaniel took the stand. Webb walked him through the sympathetic version. The shock of learning about Dominic. The grief over Louise. Nathaniel played it well, voice-breaking, eyes wet. I know I made terrible mistakes, he said. I know I hurt the man who raised me, but I was being manipulated. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. If I hadn't heard him in the warehouse, I might have believed him. Then Leonard stood for cross-examination. Mr. Freeman, you say you were manipulated, that you were confused and grieving, correct? Yes. But you forged your mother's signature 3 months before she died, while she was still alive, correct? Nathaniel hesitated. Yes. So you weren't grieving yet. I was upset. Were you upset when you photographed Alan Freeman's financial documents at 2 a.m., when you called someone and said, quote, "The crying in the rain act worked perfectly"? Nathaniel's face paled. I was confused. Were you confused when you texted about getting Alan to sign power of attorney so you could steal his $20 million? That's not. Were you manipulated when you called Alan Freeman a doormat? Nathaniel's mouth opened and closed. Leonard picked up a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 47, a psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Rachel Morrison. He turned to Nathaniel. Dr. Morrison evaluated you for diminished capacity. Shall I read her conclusion? Leonard read, the defendant shows no signs of diminished capacity. He demonstrates clear understanding of right and wrong, sophisticated planning ability, and conscious deception. His claimed remorse appears performative rather than genuine. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the count of forgery in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Nathaniel's shoulders slumped. On fraud exceeding $25,000, guilty. On attempted theft, guilty. On conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. Judge Holloway looked at Nathaniel. Mr. Freeman, please stand. Nathaniel stood on shaky legs. The jury has found you guilty on all counts. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? I'm sorry. For everything. Judge Holloway's expression didn't change. Mr. Freeman, you systematically defrauded the man who raised you. You forged your mother's will while she was dying. You destroyed a family business. And when given a chance to make amends, you attempted to steal again. I see no remorse. She picked up her gavel. On forgery in the first degree, 4 years in state prison. On fraud, 4 years consecutive. On attempted theft and conspiracy, 2 years each concurrent. Total sentence 8 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. The gavel cracked. Additionally, you will pay restitution to Alan Freeman of $5 million. Upon release, you are permanently barred from serving as a corporate officer in Michigan for 15 years. 2 officers moved forward. Nathaniel looked back at me as they led him away. I waited for some feeling, satisfaction, vindication, pity. Nothing came. Leonard approached. 8 years, that's serious. Will he serve the full 8, probably 5 or 6 with good behavior? We walked out together. The February afternoon was cold and bright. What now? Leonard asked. I thought about Montana, about Flathead Lake, about $20 million. I don't know, I said honestly. But for the first time in 6 months, that felt okay. 1 month after the trial, I stood in a bankruptcy courtroom on East Jefferson Avenue, watching Freeman Manufacturing go up for sale. The company I'd built from nothing. Nathaniel had gutted it in 6 months, fired half the workforce, liquidated inventory, stripped equipment. Now a court-appointed auctioneer was selling what remained. Opening bid, $5 million, the auctioneer announced. I raised my hand. $10 million. The room went silent. The auctioneer blinked. Sir, the opening bid is 5. I know, 10 million. Cash. There were no other bidders. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers. Freeman Manufacturing was mine again. I'd paid for it with the $12 million life insurance policy Louise had left me. The first person I called was Patricia Warner. Alan, is that really you? Patricia, I bought the company back. I'm reopening Freeman Manufacturing. I paused. And I need a COO I can trust. Someone who cares about the people, not just the profit. Silence. Then, when do I start? Monday. She laughed. I'll be there. We met at the factory on a gray March morning. The building looked worse than I remembered. Broken windows, graffiti. Inside, half the machinery was gone. What remained was covered in dust. Patricia walked beside me, her footsteps echoing. Jesus, Alan, he really destroyed it. Then we rebuilt it. We stood in what used to be the main production area. Empty, silent. I'm not going back to the Renaissance Center, I said. No corner office. I want 3 rooms at the industrial park next door, close enough to walk to the factory floor every day. Patricia nodded. Back to basics. Back to what matters. We spent the next week making lists, not profit projections, just names. 42 people. That's how many workers Nathaniel had fired. Patricia had kept the list, names, addresses, phone numbers. People who'd given Freeman Manufacturing 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. I called every single one. Some hung up when they heard my name. Others said no, they'd found new jobs, moved on, didn't trust that Freeman Manufacturing could survive. But 23 said yes. 23 people willing to come back. We reopened the factory floor in late March on a smaller scale. 1 shift instead of 3. A third of our old capacity. We focused on what we did best, precision parts for automotive suppliers. I took the small office Patricia had found, 3 rooms in an industrial park 2 blocks away. No receptionist, no mahogany desk, just a plain wooden table, a phone, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Every morning I walked to the factory, checked the production line, talked to the workers, asked what they needed. It was slow, hard. There were days when I wasn't sure we'd make payroll. Days when equipment broke down and we couldn't afford repairs, but we kept going. 2 years later, Freeman Manufacturing was running 2 shifts. We'd hired 15 new people. Revenue was up 40% from where Nathaniel had left it. Not huge, not enough to make headlines, but profitable, sustainable, honest. I stood in my office one afternoon in late autumn looking out at the factory floor. Through the glass, I could see Maria Santos, one of the original 23 who'd come back teaching a new hire how to properly weld a bracket seam. Patient, careful. The door opened behind me. Patricia stepped in carrying a stack of supplier contracts. "These need your signature." I turned from the window. Patricia had changed in 2 years. Less stress in her face. She smiled more. We both did. "Revenue projections came in," she said, setting the contracts on my desk. "We're on track to hit last year's numbers by November." "That's good." "It's better than good, Alan. 2 years ago this company was dead. You brought it back to life." I thought about that. About what back to life really meant. Not the profits or the projections, but Maria Santos training that new worker. But 23 people who'd been thrown away finding work again. But a company built on something other than greed. "We brought it back," I said. "Not just me." Patricia smiled, then her expression shifted. "There's something else." She pulled an envelope from her folder. "This came in today's mail. It's addressed to you." She handed it to me. White envelope, stamped with the Michigan Department of Corrections seal. Jackson State Prison. Inmate number 482-7754. My hands went still. I knew that number. Nathaniel. Patricia watched my face. "Do you want me to—" "No, thank you, Patricia. I'll handle it." She nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind her. I stood there holding the envelope. Through the window, I could hear the muffled sounds of the factory machinery humming voices calling out measurements, the sharp crack of metal on metal. Life. Work. People building something real. I set the envelope on my desk, unopened. Not yet. Not while the factory was running. Not while people were counting on me to keep this place alive. Tonight. After everyone went home. After the machines went silent and the lights went out. Tonight I'd open it. But for now I had work to do. That evening after Patricia locked the gate, I sat alone in my office with the envelope. Jackson State Prison. Inmate number 482-7754. Nathaniel James Freeman. I didn't open it right away. Just stared at it as the sun set. 2 years since the trial. 2 years since I'd heard his voice. I opened it. The handwriting was different, smaller, neater, careful. I unfolded the pages and began to read. "Dad, I owe you an apology. I know those words don't mean much, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for forging Mom's signature, for taking the company, the house, everything, for the cruelty, for every word that made you feel like you didn't matter. You mattered, Dad. You always mattered. I resented you for things that weren't your fault. I resented that you worked with your hands, that we lived modestly, that you loved quietly. I mistook that quietness for weakness, but you weren't weak. You were steady, kind. You showed up every day. When Dominic told me I was his son, not yours, I wanted to believe him. He offered validation, ambition, a bigger legacy. He told me you were mediocre, that I deserved better, that if I proved myself by taking everything, he'd welcome me into the Caldwell empire. So I did it. But I wasn't claiming what was mine. I was destroying the only real family I ever had. I don't blame Dominic anymore. For months I told myself he manipulated me. But my therapist, Dr. Raymond, made me see the truth. Dominic didn't force me. He gave me permission to do what I already wanted. I wanted to hurt you, because that felt easier than facing my own failures. I've been in Jackson State for 2 years. I work in the carpentry shop 6 days a week. I build furniture tables, chairs, cabinets. Slow, careful work. You measure twice, cut once. You sand until your hands ache. There's an older man here, Frank. Been inside 12 years. He's teaching me joinery, dovetails, mortise, and tenon. He told me, wood doesn't lie. If you rush it, it breaks. But if you respect it, you can build something that lasts. I'm trying to learn that. Patience, respect, humility. I also meet with Dr. Raymond twice a week. We talk about accountability, about the difference between remorse and self-pity. He's helping me understand that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. Real change means taking responsibility every day. So I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned that. I'm writing because I need you to know I see it now, all of it. The man you were, the father you were, the life I destroyed. I'm trying to become the man you thought I was. Not for you, but because it's the right thing to do. I'm eligible for parole in 3 years. If I get out, I don't expect you to be there. I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just want you to know that if we ever cross paths again, I'll be different. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. Nathaniel, I set the letter down. My hands were steady. No tears. Just stillness. I thought about Palmer Park, the 5-year-old who'd laughed when he rode his bike, the teenager who'd asked me to tie a Windsor knot, the man who'd given me 48 hours to leave. Which one was real? I thought about the carpentry shop. Frank teaching him that wood doesn't lie. Dr. Raymond and accountability. Was it real? Was he really changing? I didn't know. Couldn't know from words on paper. Louise had known Nathaniel would hurt me. She'd spent 30 years preparing for it. And I had survived. Rebuilt the company. Created something honest. I'd done it without Nathaniel. I didn't need him anymore. I folded the letter and placed it in the bottom drawer. Not thrown away. Just set aside. Then I stood, turned off the light, and walked to the window. Outside, the factory sat dark. Beyond it, Detroit glowed. And somewhere in Jackson State Prison, Nathaniel was learning to sand wood. Maybe he was changing. Maybe he wasn't. But either way, I wasn't ready. Not ready to forgive. Not ready to forget. Not ready to open that door. Maybe in 3 years, I'd feel differently. Or maybe I wouldn't. Right now, I didn't know. And that was okay. I locked the door and walked out. The parking lot was empty except for the Thunderbird gleaming under the streetlights. I climbed in and sat there listening to the engine. Louise had given me this car, this life, this second chance, and I'd used it to build something real. That was enough. I pulled out and headed toward the highway. Behind me, the factory disappeared into darkness, and in my desk drawer, Nathaniel's letter waited. Unanswered. 4 years later, I sat on the porch of the Montana cabin, watching the sun rise over Flathead Lake. 67 years old. Gray hair, reading glasses, coffee cooling in my hands. The lake stretched out like glass, reflecting mountains and pale sky. Pine trees surrounded the cabin branches, heavy with late autumn snow. The air was cold and clean. I'd been living here full-time for 6 months. Freeman Manufacturing was still running. Patricia had called last week, revenue up 12%. 230 employees, 3 shifts. But it wasn't mine anymore. 2 years ago, I'd restructured the company. Gave Patricia 40% and promoted her to CEO. Distributed 35% among senior employees. Kept 25% for myself. I didn't want control, didn't want board meetings. I wanted this. The lake, the mountains, the silence. Patricia had protested. Alan, it's your company. And now I'm giving it to people who'll build it a third time, I'd told her. She'd cried, promised to make me proud. She had, every day. I watched a bald eagle soar across the lake. I thought about Louise often these days, not with anger, just understanding. She'd lied for 35 years. Let me raise another man's child. But she'd also loved me, in her broken way. The offshore accounts, the cabin, the insurance, the Thunderbird, the evidence against Dominic. She'd spent 3 decades building me a lifeboat, making sure that when everything fell apart, I'd have the tools to survive. That was love, too. Imperfect, guilt-ridden, but real. I'd forgiven her. Not immediately. But over the years, I'd let go of the anger. She'd made impossible choices, carried the weight until cancer took her, and in the end, she'd given me a second life. Some mornings, I'd imagine her beside me watching the sunrise. I'd tell her about Patricia, about the workers who'd come back, and I'd tell her I understood, that I forgave her, that I was grateful. I thought about Nathaniel, too. Not as often, not with the same softness, but the rage was gone. He'd been released 18 months ago, served 5 years with good behavior. Leonard had called asking if I wanted restraining orders. I'd said no. Nathaniel had sent 2 letters, both forwarded through Leonard's office. I'd read them but never responded. The first was short. He'd found work at a furniture shop in Ann Arbor, trying to stay honest. The second 6 months later was longer. He'd written about the shop, the small apartment, the AA meetings he attended twice a week. Dr. Raymond said it's about accountability. He'd asked how I was, said he hoped I was happy, said he thought about Palmer Park sometimes. I know I can't go back, he'd written. But I wanted you to know I remember, that you mattered. I'd folded that letter and put it in the drawer. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to see him, to talk, to rebuild something. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But the hate was gone. He was just a man now. Not my son. Not my enemy. Just a man trying to become better. I hoped he succeeded. For his sake, not mine. But I didn't need to be part of that journey. I walked to the small garage. Inside sat the Thunderbird. 1954 Ford Thunderbird, turquoise blue, chrome accents, white wall tires, the car that had changed everything. I ran my hand along the hood. This car had been Louise's secret, her apology, her promise, and it had become my symbol, my reminder that you can rebuild. I'd driven it across the country, Detroit to Montana, from the warehouse to this cabin. Every mile had been a step away from the past. The Thunderbird had carried me here, to this place, this peace. I was walking back when my phone rang. I pulled it from my pocket, expecting Patricia. She called every Sunday morning, but the number wasn't Patricia's. Michigan area code. Ann Arbor, maybe. I stood there, finger hovering over the button. It could be anyone. But I knew it wasn't. I knew who it was. Some part of me had been waiting for this call for 4 years. I pressed the green button. Hello? Silence. Just breathing. Steady, nervous breathing. Then a voice. Older. Rougher. But familiar. Dad, it's Nathaniel. I closed my eyes. The morning sun was warm on my face. The mountains rose in the distance. I know, I said quietly. I'm out. Been out for 18 months now. I wanted to call sooner, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. His voice cracked. Do you... I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, looking at the cabin Louise had left me. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm listening. Silence. Then, can we talk, not now, not on the phone, but sometime? Maybe meet for coffee. I just want to see you, to show you I'm different. The mountains watched. The lake waited, and I stood at a crossroads I'd been avoiding for 4 years. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "That's more than I deserve," Nathaniel said, his voice thick. "Thank you, Dad, for listening. I'm not promising anything. I know. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." "Okay," I said. "I'll think about it." We hung up. I stood in the driveway, phone in hand, looking at the Thunderbird gleaming in the garage. Behind me, the cabin door was open. Coffee was getting cold. Ahead of me, the future waited. Uncertain. Open. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't know what I was going to do. I stood in the driveway, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Nathaniel breathe. The silence stretched between us, like the distance between Michigan and Montana, hundreds of miles, 4 years, a lifetime of choices that couldn't be undone. Finally, he spoke. "Dad, I'm not calling to ask for anything. I have a job, a small apartment. I'm managing." His voice was steady but quiet. "I'm calling because I need you to know something. 8 years, 5 in prison, 3 since I got out. That's a long time to think about what you've done." I didn't say anything, just listened. "I understand now what I took from you. Not just the company or the house. I took 35 years of fatherhood and told you it meant nothing. I called you weak. I destroyed the one person who ever loved me unconditionally." His voice cracked. "And I'm sorry, Dad. I mean it. I'm so sorry." The mountains watched. A cold breeze moved through the pines. "Nathaniel," I said slowly, "what do you want from this call?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know I'm different, that I'm trying to be the man you thought I was." "Why does that matter to you?" A pause. "Because you were my father. Not biologically, but in every way that mattered. You taught me to ride a bike. You came to every graduation, every moment of my life, and I threw that away." His breath hitched. "I can't take it back, but I need you to know I see it now." I closed my eyes. The morning sun was warm on my face. "Do you have anything, money, savings?" "No, nothing. I used what I had to pay restitution. 5 million, I'll be paying that debt for the rest of my life. Garnished wages, payment plans." He laughed bitterly. "But I'm not calling for help, Dad. I'm calling to tell you I'm standing on my own." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "You're not going to offer to help?" "No." Silence. "I understand," he said quietly. "Nathaniel," I said carefully, "I can't say I've forgiven you. I don't know if I ever will. What you did broke something that can't be fixed." I paused. "But I hope you find a good path forward. I hope you become the man you're trying to be. That's more than I deserve. Maybe. But it's where I am right now." "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Are you happy, Dad, after everything? Did you find happiness?" I looked at the cabin, at the lake, at the Thunderbird gleaming in the garage, at the mountains. "Yes," I said. "I did." "Good. You deserve that." "Nathaniel," I said, "if you really want to show me you've changed, don't do it with words. Do it with actions. Live honestly. Work hard. Build something good. Not for me. For yourself." "I will." "Then that's enough." We sat in silence for a moment. "I should let you go," Nathaniel said. "Thank you for listening, for not hanging up." "Take care of yourself," I said. "You too, Dad, and thank you for 35 years of love I didn't deserve." "Goodbye, Nathaniel." "Goodbye, Dad." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen, and then slowly I smiled. Not because I'd forgiven him, not because we'd reconciled, but because I realized something. I was free. Free from anger. free from the need for revenge, free from hate. Nathaniel's redemption, if it ever came, was his own, and I didn't need to be part of it. I didn't need him to change for me to be okay. I didn't need closure or apologies or reconciliation. I just needed to let go. And standing there in the Montana morning, I finally did. I walked back to the cabin and up the porch steps. I poured a fresh cup of coffee and stood at the window looking out at the lake. The water was turning from black to blue to silver as the sun climbed. A pair of loons called across the water. Life. Simple. Quiet. Real. I walked to the mantel above the fireplace. There in a wooden frame was our wedding photo. Louise in her white dress. Me in my father's borrowed suit. Both of us grinning outside Detroit City Hall. We'd been 23. Broke. So happy. I touched the frame gently. "Thank you, Louise," I whispered. "For the second chance. For the life you gave me. For loving me enough to prepare for the worst." The photo didn't answer, but I felt something, a warmth, a sense that somewhere she knew. I turned toward the window. Outside, the Thunderbird sat in the garage, turquoise paint gleaming. Tomorrow I'd take it for a drive, up into the mountains, around the lake, nowhere in particular. But tonight I'd sit on the porch, watch the sunset, listen to the water. I'd make dinner, read a book, maybe call Patricia. And then I'd sleep peacefully in this cabin Louise had left me, in this life she'd built for me, in this second chance she'd given me. Because for the first time in 67 years, I was truly free. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free from expectations. Free to be Alan Freeman, not a husband, not a father, not a CEO, just a man, living a quiet life, finding joy in simple things. I stepped to the door and looked out at the Montana evening. The sun was beginning its descent. The sky was turning pink and gold. The lake reflected it all. Beautiful. Perfect. Mine. I smiled and stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind me. The past was behind me. The future was uncertain. But right now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. And that was enough. Looking back at everything I've been through, I want to share something with you. Don't be like me. Don't wait until everything falls apart to see what's really happening. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't let secrets fester for 35 years until they destroy everything you've built. The lesson I learned the hardest way: silence has a cost. Louise's lies, born from fear and shame, created a cascade of pain that touched everyone. Nathaniel's betrayal, rooted in identity crisis and manipulation, left wreckage in its wake. And my willingness to accept things without asking hard questions made me complicit in my own destruction. But here's what I also learned: God gives second chances. When I stood in that warehouse with nothing but a key and a prayer, I didn't know how I'd survive. But the tools were already there. Louise's preparation, my own resilience, and something bigger than both of us guiding me forward. God doesn't waste our pain. He uses it to rebuild us into something stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And finally, forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. I forgave Louise because holding on to anger would have poisoned the second life she gave me. I let go of Nathaniel because hating him would have kept me chained to the past. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting people back in. It means freeing yourself to move forward. My advice: trust but verify. Love but protect yourself. And when everything falls apart, remember that God is in the business of rebuilding broken things. I appreciate you staying with me until the very end. Drop a 2 in the comments if this story spoke to you. Just a note: this narrative includes fictional elements crafted for reflection and insight. If it's not your cup of tea, no worries, feel free to find what resonates with you. For those who connected with this journey, your comments, shares, and subscriptions mean the world. Thank you.